Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. The Lakers drop one of their dress rehearsal games as the regular season draws closer. That's next on Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, sometimes on weekends, no matter how or where you get your podcasts, always free. Look at that. Nice work, Andy. You can subscribe to Locked On Lakers on Apple, on Spotify, on Stitcher, on Odyssey. You can subscribe in the Locked On Lakers YouTube channel. All the things that Andy has graciously put up in a variety of fonts on the Locked On Lakers YouTube page. Make another Locked On podcast your second listen of every day. Lots to talk about in Wednesday's 118-113 loss to the Minnesota Timberwolves at the Crypt. Lakers dropped to 1-4 on the preseason, 0-4 at home. Andy struggling to finish games in front of the home crowd.
Well, they're also struggling, or not even struggling. They are opting not to put out a finishing lineup to close those games. Darvin, I guess, is struggling to take the preseason so seriously that he's going to play LeBron and AD extra minutes in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, they do seem conscious of school nights and things like that. Giving kids the opportunity to get home a little bit early, so they're not late to school on Thursday morning. There was a moment on the I was watching the Spectrum broadcast, and Lakers making like a little push there in the fourth quarter with the younger guys, some of the reserves, and I think it was Billy Mack said, Lakers looking like they might be able to, mount a comeback here, and all I could think of in my head was, please don't. It's not needed. Nobody needs overtime. Either win the game or lose the game. There were some trends though, Andy, that certainly came through. We'll start with the positive stuff because it was not one of their better efforts, I thought, over the course of the preseason. But if you wanted to see good stuff from LeBron James and Anthony Davis, you certainly got that. Between the two of them, they were 16 of 23. They combined for 44 points, 24 rebounds. I mean, those two guys looked good.
Yeah, and it was, one of those nights where you saw the possibilities of what could be there, if nothing else, with LeBron and AD as a foundation. They needed more support than they got tonight, and that's something we're going to end up getting into pretty much across the board. They did
Lonnie Walker, who was in the starting lineup, and we'll talk about starting lineups and Walker's performance over the course of the show. But aside from Walker, that was it. Nobody really did a whole lot. Pat Bev was fine, I guess, but the outside shooting was terrible.
Well, and Patrick Beverley, too, some of those points were backloaded because he spent some time playing with the reserves. So for the purposes of this particular conversation,
first half, when it mattered, he was not.
Right, exactly. It's a bit misleading. Westbrook was just 5 points, 1 of 3 from the field, only took 3 shots, got to the line 6 times, only made half of those free throws, 4 assists, but 3 turnovers, including 2 where he stepped out of bounds, which I guess glass half full is, okay, it's Russell Westbrook is not going to do that on a regular basis. He's been around the league long enough. He's experienced enough. That's kind of fluky. The glass half empty.
He knows where the sideline is.
Right. Well, I'm just saying you don't expect Russell Westbrook to do that twice in one game on a regular basis. The glass half empty version, though, of the turnovers is he could have at least had 3 more on actual passes. Like Russ was definitely doing his, I'm going to practice my serious needle threading passes during this game because it is a dress rehearsal, and frankly, we're kind of crapping the bed anyway. So why not?
There were some. I'm not saying he was literally trying to do this. There were some. I'm trying to get on Sports Center passes in this one, like Russell Westbrook still got it type passes. I do want to spend a little bit of time before we're done tonight talking about Russ. Wasn't very good tonight, and just the perception of him in the preseason to me and what constitutes good is something worth a few minutes. So we'll get to that. But, our friend Daman Rangula, who's been on the show and is a great follow on Twitter at Daman R. Most Lakers fans, I think, probably already follow him. But if you don't, you should. He noted as AD got off to another strong start, again, 7-11 from the floor, 19 points, 13 rebounds, only played 27 minutes. 2 block shots. He looked good. He pointed out that there's really no offensive rotation. There's no lineup choice. There's no anything really that Darvin himself can control that is more important than Anthony Davis playing the way that he has over the course of this preseason. Like, we made a huge deal out of it all summer. The biggest differentiator between this team struggling to, bust out of the play-in game versus, surprising 5 seed or 4 seed or something like that is Anthony Davis is an all-star versus Anthony Davis is an MVP candidate.
Look, this is something that has been said by people ranging from Darvin Ham, who has stressed that AD is the key to it all this season, to people who cover the team, to Kevin Garnett, at least on a couple occasions, has talked about like Anthony Davis needs to be a bleeping monster. Like, he needs to be looking to tell the entire league, I'm that dude. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm that dude, and you are not going to be able to deal with me. I'm going to be a problem. And, he's always a really good player, period. Like, the baseline for Anthony Davis is going to be, assuming he's on the floor, very good, because he's just that talented.
He's just right. He's too good to be worse than that.
Right. But he needs to be better than that baseline, because otherwise you are just putting way too much still on LeBron's shoulders. And the supporting cast, I don't want to get too caught up in one collectively bad night, because we've said over the course of the preseason, on the whole, the supporting cast has actually been pretty good.
Yeah.
But it is a reminder, though, that other than Russell Westbrook, you have nobody who has ever been even in the proximity of all-star consideration.
Right.
And there is a...
Like, Kendrick Nunn's looked great in the preseason tonight. I think he was 2 for 11, had his first clunker of a game. He's not even like a all-star adjacent or whatever. And like, there's nobody that's even come close to making an all-star team outside of those 3 guys.
No, Kendrick Nunn is not definitive starter.
Right.
In this league.
I mean,
not looking to take anything away from him, but I'm just saying, like, I like Kendrick Nunn. I thought last year he was missed. I liked that signing when they got him. I was actually surprised they were able to get him at that price. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't change the fact that he's not like an established high-end starter in the league, much less all-star. So, a lot of that gap beyond what just these other guys need to produce on their own, at the end of the day, it falls on Anthony Davis's shoulders, and that is what is supposed to happen for a guy who's supposed to be an all-NBA caliber, high all-NBA caliber player in his prime. Mm-hmm. That's the burden.
And, if you want to find a glass half full kind of thing, it's just Darvin talked about it after the game. They did lack a little bit of snap, a little bit of pop, and, the aggressiveness, they just felt a quarter beat slower on Wednesday than they had throughout much of the preseason. And he attributed that to some of the really, really bad shooting. I mean, you take away the guys that we mentioned, Davis, James, and Walker, and like nobody could hit a shot. And even those guys, LeBron was 2 of 4 from 3-point range. As a team, they shot 25% from 3. And I think that was boosted by a late Damian Jones 3. Swider hit 1 in the 4th quarter.
Wenyen Gabriel hit 1.
Right.
Really
they were down around 20% for most of the game. So when you don't shoot, and this is not just unique to this team. When you don't shoot well, you tend to lose a little bit of energy. I mean, you just get frustrated, and that happens. I just say, when those guys have to play at that level for the Lakers to have a shot. And so we'll talk about Westbrook later in the show, but let's talk about Lonnie Walker next, because He was in the starting lineup with Patrick Beverley, which in and of itself is interesting. Walker played well again. He did get hurt, but Ham did not seem terribly concerned after the game. Mild sprain, they called it, will be reevaluated on Thursday. But let's talk about the way Walker played, and also whether or not this starting lineup is one that you would roll with. And we'll do that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by BetOnline, betonline.net, your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest, easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. But of course, the NBA. That's why you folks are all here, and it's like last days to get ahead of the 2023 season, lay down some early action. The Lakers had been just a few weeks ago a 6-point underdog in their season opener against the Warriors in the Bay Area. It's down to 5.5, but now that we know Draymond's going to be available, it could bump back up to 6. If you want to get in your number now, get it in early before BetOnline starts paying it more attention. LeBron is currently 14-1 to lead the league in scoring. That would make him 6th overall amongst the odds for these players. Joel Embiid, your current favorite. So head to the website today, use your mobile device, learn more about the trends in action, BetOnline where the game starts.
So the people don't like it when we call it the big three, Andy. They don't believe Russell Westbrook should be considered part of the big three. He certainly isn't one of the big three in terms of production, but in terms of name value, star power, and what everybody's talking about when you talk about the big three, he's part of the big three. I don't make the rules, don't at me. But
he was brought in to be part of a big three, and he's paid like the biggest of the
man
three.
Makes $47.5 million. He's a big three.
It's a flipping big three, people.
Plus Lonnie Walker and Patrick Beverley, which is not necessarily a starting combination that I have thought a lot about. Pat Bev with say Russ and Austin Reaves out there or something like that. There have been a bunch of different ones, but Lonnie Walker as a starter is not necessarily something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. I'll be honest with you. I am kind of agnostic on like which combination they go with, because I think there are probably a bunch of them that make sense. I don't want to see like Schroeder start, but broadly, they could put together a lot of combinations with the starting lineup that kind of make sense. And if Walker's shooting well, he's part of that. I still think it was an interesting twist that on this sort of dress rehearsal night, that was the backcourt they went with Pat Bev and Lonnie Walker.
Yeah, it was interesting. I did not expect that. I mean, it makes
I'm sorry, the other two spots. I shouldn't say backcourt because technically Walker was playing the three.
Yeah, it makes a bit of sense when you think about the idea that the Lakers don't really have a natural fit for that three spot to begin with, particularly if they're going with AD at the 5 and LeBron.
And while Troy Brown is hurt. Yeah.
Right. Well, while Troy Brown is hurt and also while Juan Toscano-Anderson doesn't play, he was held out of tonight's game, lingering just precautions because of that quad injury from earlier in the preseason. I don't think they're concerned about anything long-term. I think if this was a game that actually mattered, JTA would have been able to play, but there's no reason to push it in a preseason game. But I remember, I believe it was actually Tuesday's show or Monday's, but I know it's come up this week. I know I had thrown out the idea of JTA as a potential starter at the 3, especially because if you're looking among the two or three biggest guys they have for that spot, especially with Troy Brown still unavailable, the shooting between Reaves and JTA is a wash. I mean, neither one of them, frankly, is good enough in terms of what you want in that spot. So it starts turning into what you think either does defensively, what you think either of them does in terms of playmaking, what you think either of them does in terms of just being in the right spots, stuff like that. Both are pretty high IQ players. So I can see a potential argument for either one of them as an imperfect option. Where Walker becomes interesting is he's obviously a more athletic, dynamic scorer than Reaves or JTA or frankly Troy Brown once he's eventually available. And Walker's only 6'4", but he's really long. So if you want to try to experiment with him out there for defensive purposes, again, acknowledging there's no real obvious choice.
Mm-hmm.
Walker, in that sense, follows as much logic as anyone else.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not the wrong. I don't think there are a lot of wrong answers here. This is part of the blessing. I think the blessing and the curse of the roster that's been.
There's no wrong answers because there's not a lot of right answers.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like there's no patently. That's the problem. Is there's no clear like yes, this is how you would put it together because this makes the most sense. Could you start Kendrick Nunn with Patrick Beverley and Russell Westbrook? Sure, I think you could try that. You could try Lonnie Walker. You could try Austin Reaves. You could obviously move Westbrook to the bench if you want to. That's not something I think they're going to do. But at least think
not this early.
Not this early. We're not. I should correct. It could happen eventually, but not yet. Where I think it's interesting as well with a guy like Walker versus somebody like Reaves is twofold. First, whether you're starting Beverly or starting Nunn, and I do think it's going to be Pat Bev on opening night. He's not Chris Paul, but he's a perfectly functional, smart point guard who will make the right pass and can, do stuff and move the ball around. He had 5 assists on Wednesday night. Again, some of that backloaded, but the point being, like Patrick Beverley knows how to play in an offense and make the right pass. And you have Westbrook, and you have James, and you have Davis. You don't necessarily need Austin Reaves' sort of wheel greasing skill set as effective as it is next to LeBron and with a guy like Davis and all that kind of stuff. Particularly since Walker has shown much better playmaking than I would have expected. And so that has an influence there too. Walker did sprain an ankle, his left ankle. More information, I'm sure, will come out about that following practice on Thursday. Let's just assume, for argument's sake, that he's okay. That he
walked out under his own power,
right?
Which
probably won't play Friday as a precaution and whatever, but that he's available when the 18th rolls around. Do you think this is the starting lineup that they're going to roll with on opening night?
I do think it's possible, in part because Schroeder's back now, and he played. He made his debut tonight. It was pretty uneventful. He only played 9 minutes. He looked okay. 0 for 4 from the field. He had a rebound, turnover.
He barely noticed he was there.
I mean, he was disruptive in a couple spots defensively, like areas that don't come up in the stat sheet, but he did some good things. But for the most part, he was And, to be fair to Dennis, it's 9 minutes. Mm-hmm. So there's only so much opportunity to really shine. But him being back reduces one more guard spot, at least theoretically, or one more place to play a guard. And Dennis is he's one of the only guards that they have that even with it's all relative size issues, you can't slide Dennis up. Like Schroeder cannot be slid up to a 2, much less to a 3.
Or a 3, can't run around with small 4,
right. Like he
forwards,
can,
right.
You can maybe have him, right. You can have him operate in certain senses like a shooting guard, but you can't,
defensively, he weighs 170 pounds. He
right. Like let's not be silly about this. So
I am heavier than Dennis Schroeder, and I'm not, that fat anymore.
No. You used to be, but not anymore. Not anymore.
Not that fat anymore.
Right.
That's actually what it says on my business cards. Brian Kamenetsky, not that fat anymore.
But so if you're looking to play as many of these guys as possible, and like we've talked about, the smalls have collectively outplayed the bigs that aren't named Anthony or Davis. And it was another night tonight where, Bryant.
Well, they didn't. I mean, Damian Jones barely played. Damian Jones didn't play until the end. And Bryant, because they went, this is the function of going small. if you're going to do this, whether, Matt Ryan played a little bit tonight, which is, we'll see if we can get to it today for today's show. But if not, we'll touch on it at least a little bit on Thursday, because I thought that was a little interesting.
G League Matty Ice.
But whether it's Ryan or Toscano-Anderson when he's healthy or whatever, there is very limited room to get anybody else on the floor who isn't one of these guards. Bryant will take a few minutes or Damian Jones, depending on the matchup, will take a few minutes when Anthony Davis isn't playing. But if you're going to go small and start Davis at the 5, you're not going to see those guys very much. There's just no room there's no time to play them. So I think it's both a function of they were fine. Bryant was fine. But there's also just no way to play him. Someone's got to sit if you're going to give these guys that kind of play.
But that's where Walker potentially, as an undersized 3, if he can maintain some type of defensive integrity, and to his credit, I think he really has been putting his money where his mouth was heading into this preseason, because he's not been a good defender over the course of his career.
And the Lakers were not great defensively against Minnesota on Wednesday.
But I do think he's been trying. I absolutely
think that
so.
Is half the battle.
Look, that being said, assuming Walker's available on opening night, would it shock me if he was the starting 3? No, it would not. Whether that's ideal or not, again, they don't have an ideal choice. So you can make an argument for him.
Let's talk about Russell Westbrook, and we'll do that next. Before we get into Russ's sort of game itself and the preseason overall, because we haven't talked a lot about him. Like, he hasn't been, a dominant point of conversation on every show or whatever. And that's probably good. But there was a moment that's gone kind of viral, as the kids say. When was
friend
this
of the show, Jacob Root from Silver Screen and Roll tweeted this out.
Yeah. It was during the Wednesday's game. Patrick Beverley is bringing everybody together in the first half. Guys, come on, let's huddle up and all this stuff and whatever. And Russ, it's like 4 dudes. It's Pat Bev, and they're gathered at the free throw line, and LeBron and Lonnie Walker's there getting ready to huddle up, and AD is there, and they can't get Russ into the huddle. Russ won't huddle. He's not coming to the huddle. And people it went viral. The moment went viral, Andy.
Yes, it did.
Should people read into it? Because it looked like, and it's video and it can be very deceptive, but it looked like Russ was like sulking and not being part of the team. Like, I'm not going to get in your huddle, Patrick Beverley. I don't care if you threw me a towel at if I threw you a towel at your introductory press conference. I'm not doing that. And it got people chit-chatting.
Yeah. To be fair to Russ, I do think what had been going on.
Not sure anybody's interested in that, Andy.
Look, everybody has already made their pre-decided judgment. I just want to give everybody all the information so they can make the best informed version of pre-decided judgment. But I believe what had been going on, there were 2 feeds of this game. There was the Spectrum feed, the Lakers TV partner, and also this game happened to be on ESPN. You and I were both watching the Spectrum feed, but this was only picked up, this moment, really on the ESPN feed. But I believe what had been going on leading up to that, Russ had just taken a foul. I want to say on McDaniels driving to the basket, and he didn't like the call and had been talking with the ref while this was going on as Patrick Beverley's trying to huddle everyone. And I think there is a real possibility that Russ wasn't resisting the huddle so much out of defying, team unity as it was, I'm trying to make my point with the ref because I'm upset, which doesn't make that necessarily okay, but that is different than giving double middle fingers to
the team. I agree with you. I mean, I don't know what exactly. A lot of stuff like can be happening. It's off frame and he's setting up and he's not listening to them and he's mad. I mean, guys get upset about stuff. The larger point to me was this is the kind of thing that is going to be scrutinized to the ends of the earth. And like maybe there is something there. I don't know. But the body language wasn't good, the look wasn't good, and because people are waiting for something to go horribly wrong with this, like, nobody's really buying that Westbrook is all in and that, it's great with Pat Bev and the chemistry has changed and everything's hunky dory. I mean, even the people who are optimistic and think there's at least a possibility that could happen. I am in that group. I was like, the possibility exists. I'm not there yet. I'm not like buying that this is just like we're good. This is the level of scrutiny, and I to some degree, I think that everybody needs to be aware of it. So in those moments where is genuine frustration, when there is the kinds of stuff that happens on every team. I'm not talking about Draymond punching, Jordan Poole, but like normal team in the game frustration stuff. The Lakers are going to have to be really careful, and Westbrook in particular is going to have to be really careful just about body language and the general vibe that he's sending out.
Well,
it's going to be scrutinized to the nth degree.
It also doesn't help that it was Patrick Beverley specifically calling this huddle and Russell Westbrook specifically not going over to Patrick Beverley's called huddle, because despite the fact that these guys have been best friends, according to Patrick Beverley, throughout training camp, it doesn't help that it's those two in particular.
Oh, completely. And people are looking for things to latch onto and be like, aha, told you. It's not working. They already hate each other. And this is the social media Twitter age that we live in. But this is the world that everybody is going to be living in. How do you think Russ has looked this preseason? Because tonight, Wednesday, he wasn't very good. But throughout most of the preseason, people have been, the sort of the general commentary is that, well, Russ has been okay. He's looking pretty good. What do you think about how he's been, through 5 games? He hasn't played in all of them, but
I was going to say he hasn't played in all of them, and he hasn't played full games in any of them. I think at times Russ has looked pretty good. I think I can recall over the course of his preseason 2, 7 or 8 minute stints in the first quarter where he basically played all 7 or 8 of those minutes, where I thought for the most part he looked pretty good. Then, if memory serves, in both of those stints, like his next shifts coming in, I didn't think he looked quite as good. I think he looks like somebody who is still trying to figure out exactly what he's supposed to be doing and how best to go about doing it. I think it helps a lot when the team can run. And this was a game where they weren't able to run as much as they had in some of the earlier preseason games. And I think for Russ to do some of the best off-ball stuff for him personally, it really helps if he can get out and run, or if he can trigger the opportunities to run, that sort of stuff. This was the first game where Russ seemed just out of sorts and unsure of himself.
It was a very clunky game.
This was the most awkward that he's looked since the preseason began. Where the whole what the hell do you do with Russ if he's not going to be Russell Westbrook thing seemed pretty pronounced.
Yeah, because a lot of it has been, to some degree, it's like you go back to the opening game where people was like, "Ooh, Russ looked pretty." Took like 4 shots or 5 shots, 6 shots. It wasn't like he was, put up 26 points. The gap, a lot of, I think, what defines is Russ playing well now is is he setting the off ball screens? Is he trying on defense and all that kind of, which is obviously is important. But a lot of it is just like, does he look like he's in the way? Because if he's not looking like he's in the way, that's good. If good things happen, great. But let's just try to keep bad things from happening. And a lot of that is, does Russ look like he's in the way? And the contrast that's sticking out to me is the gap between what Darvin and Rob Pelinka have said about Westbrook. He's, one of the greatest players who ever played. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a star in this league. And what they actually seem to be designing to show that. Like Anthony Davis is getting attention. They are running this stuff through AD. LeBron is getting is getting his shots. They're not doing anything to really, quote unquote, unleash Russ. I'm not saying they should, but I find that sort of gap between the talk and what we're seeing so far to be interesting. So maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that on Thursday's show. Jeannie Buss had a fascinating interview with Rich Eisen this week that we want to get into. That is also making the rounds. Not enough time on today's show, but we'll talk about that for sure for Friday's show, and we'll get you ready for the final preseason game of the year before the real game starts. So a lot to come on Thursday and Friday. So wait, no, this is Thursday. So a lot to come for Friday's show, and we'll see everybody tomorrow.